What's up, everybody? It's AT. In just one moment, we're going to talk about a topic that I frankly wouldn't normally talk about, but it is so big. So many of you have asked me about it that I've decided to divert from the college football, divert from the college basketball. We're going to talk a little bit about this crazy back and forth between Pat McAfee and ESPN. It started on Friday. It continued on Monday. Had a bunch of you ask me about it. Figured as a guy who's been in the sports media now for about a decade, I'm probably somebody that can give you some unique perspective that maybe you haven't heard anywhere else. So we will discuss that in just one moment. Before we get started, quick favor. Do me a quick favor and subscribe to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. I just pointed to the bottom of the screen. Click the little subscribe button. Put on those notifications. We got so much content coming out here. Even with college football done, we are not slowing down. We still got the portal. We'll talk college hoops. Maybe dabble a little bit in the NFL. But listen, if you like me, if you like this page, we are not slowing down. So go ahead, make sure and subscribe. With that said, let's get to just a topic that is so fascinating that so many of you have asked me about. And I just want to share very quickly some thoughts on this wild back and forth with Pat McAfee and ESPN. Now, to be clear, a lot of you probably sitting there saying, Torres, this is kind of out of your wheelhouse. You wouldn't normally talk about this. My general rule about sports and sports media is when it comes to sports media, I generally try to stay in my lane. Don't talk about other people. Don't talk about other companies. Don't talk about this. Don't talk about that. Unless, of course, somebody talks about me first. Losers, Kyle Tucker from The Athletic, that loser that can't keep his name out of my mouth. Oh, I'm going to come back at him when necessary. Unblock me, Kyle. Unblock me, JJ Redick. But anyway, I generally try to stay out of other people's business, other people's whatever. But when Pat McAfee puts this out to the world, calling out his bosses, it felt like I had to at least talk about it very quick, share some perspective, and maybe one thing that you haven't really considered in the bigger picture of all this. I think if you're watching this video, most people probably know. Wild 72 hours or so, 96 hours, whatever, for Pat McAfee, a real star at ESPN. And like I said, I'm just not a person that gets jealous. I want everybody to have success in this business because success for them hopefully will mean success for me down the road. I think Pat McAfee's really good. Didn't love him on game day, but I think he's an incredible radio host. He was great on WWE. And frankly, even on game day, he kind of grew on me. I liked having him on set, etc. But I bring it up because he was brought to ESPN this summer under very, noteworthy circumstances. Brought in, immediately became one of the highest paid employees. I think the reports are that he was getting paid $18 million a year, and good for him. I'm not jealous. He's worked hard. He deserves exactly what he has. I bring it up because last week, I guess it was a New York Post article comes out basically insinuating that his ratings aren't good enough and that he is not justifying the $18 million a year salary that he has. As a matter of fact, I have the article right in front of me, the title of the article right now. It said, what was the title of the article? Let me make sure to find it. The title of the article, this is really bad podcasting and radio. It was from the New York Post. Pat McAfee needs to produce better ratings to be worth $85 million and headaches for ESPN. So this article comes out, and obviously Pat McAfee sees it, and he's obviously not very happy about it. First of all, I think there was some context missing. You listen to people at ESPN, they say they didn't just bring him on to get good TV ratings. He's a multi-platform star. He's great on YouTube, great on social media, TikTok, Twitter. You can basically put Pat McAfee everywhere, and he is going to create content and interest and whatever. I'd add as well, there's a lot of value to having him on game day. There's a lot of value to having him on multicasts, all that good stuff. So Pat McAfee brings a ton of value to ESPN, but this article comes out from the New York Post basically saying he ain't doing enough. Well, on his show on Friday, Pat McAfee addressed this article and went after one of his bosses specifically, one of the most blatant, I don't know that I've ever seen an on-air personality publicly call out a boss by name on national TV. I guess it wasn't technically on ESPN. It was during the hour that is YouTube only. But here's what Pat McAfee said. He said, we're very appreciative and we understand that more people are watching this show than ever before. We're very thankful for the ESPN folks for being very hospitable. Now, there are some people actively trying to sabotage us from within ESPN. More specifically, I believe Norby Williamson is the guy who is attempting to sabotage our program. Now, I'm not 100% sure. That is just seemingly the only human that has this information. And then that information gets leaked and it's wrong, and it sets a narrative for what our show is. And then we are going to combat that rat from every single time. Somebody tried to get ahead of our actual ratings release with the wrong numbers 12 hours beforehand. That's a sabotage attempt. It's been happening the entire season from some people who didn't necessarily love the old edition of the Pat McAfee show to the ESPN family. There's a lot of those. So how about that? Pat McAfee calling out his boss on national TV, calling him a rat on national TV. Unbelievable. And then the wild part was you had a 72-hour window. That happened on Friday. Saturday goes by, Sunday goes by, Monday, he addresses it on his show yet again from Houston at the national championship game, where he says this. He does a long rant, and it was interesting because he did this long rant, and he basically thanked a ton of people at ESPN. Thanked some of his bosses, thanked behind-the-scenes people, thanked people that work on the show. So it was actually very nice. I thought he did a good job of showing how many people, are behind the scenes that help him and his show look great. But then he ended. He said, there's certainly some people we don't like, certainly. And they don't like us. That's how it's going to be. And I don't take back anything I said about that person. And so, like I said, I've had a lot of you over the last couple of days just reach out and say, Torres, you work in media. What the heck just happened there? Have you ever seen anything like this? To be blunt, I have not. It is surreal to watch, but I do think I have some kind of unique perspective on all of this. Just some thoughts in general I want to share with you as we get ready for the national championship game. I'm sure many of you will be watching this after the title game. First of all, I know he said he's not 100% sure. I feel very confident saying that if he isn't 99.99999% sure on who it is, he would not have called out somebody by name. So it feels very clear to me that we know who this guy is. And I think the thing that me being in the media that stands out is what I can say is this. I've had some great bosses in media, incredible bosses, some of the best bosses I've ever had. I've also had some really bad bosses as well. And I think the one thing that stands out to me working in sports, as long as I have, over a decade, the thing that stands out is that I think from the outside, people would think it's like a sports team, right? Everybody gets along. Everybody's rowing in the same direction. Everybody's fighting for the same cause. What I can tell you is that is not the case at all. And it is no different than any other office space with egos and jealousy and this and that. And what I would say is in the media space, I can only speak to my personal experience, but there are some places where it's actually worse than most workplaces. Now, some places it's great. Some places it's great. But there are some places where it's not. And I bring it up solely to say, and again, I've had great bosses. I work for a couple great bosses right now that always have my back. I appreciate them. But why I bring it up is because what I have noticed in other jobs that I've had in previous iterations of my life, it's actually the exact opposite. What ends up happening is you have front-facing talent, like a Pat McAfee, like a Stephen A. Smith, like a whomever, and they create a lot of interest, a lot of buzz, a lot of excitement. And what ends up happening is, especially in this corporate media, you have a bunch of empty suits at the top that don't really do anything. And so they all want to have their input in this, their input in that. They want to suggest this, they want to suggest that. And when the talent either doesn't listen or when their own bosses go over their heads and say, this is what we're going to do, people get mad. People get jealous. Everybody wants to take credit for the current big thing and the next big thing. And so when I look at this situation, I don't think Pat McAfee says this guy's name if he's not certain that this is the guy that's doing it. And two, if you put the puzzle pieces together, it feels pretty obvious that this is the guy. And it feels pretty obvious that in this war of words, Pat McAfee is probably going to win. I saw a lot of that this week. Well, what's his future? I mean, he's not going to last at ESPN. No, I think it's the exact opposite. I think this is the first time where he had to look somebody in the eye, and he won that battle hook, line, and sinker. First of all, did you see where Pat McAfee was on Saturday night? He was at that Indianapolis Colts game, final play, CJ Stroud, all that good stuff against the Houston Texans. Fourth down didn't go the Colts' way. But I bring it up because did you see the picture that he took at the game? He was there. And remember, the game was on ESPN, so they obviously had their A-team there. I think that was the Joe Buck, Troy Aikman crew. But they had their A-team there. And you saw who was there? A guy named Burke Mangus, who is like second in charge of all of ESPN. Just so happens he's one step above Norby Williamson. And did you notice that Burke Mangus took a picture with Pat McAfee and Pat McAfee smiling. He's telling him how happy he is and how much he appreciates ESPN. And so when the guy that you're calling out, when his boss chooses to take a picture with you over him, that's probably a good sign. And I noticed something else too. And I led the segment by saying this. Pat McAfee is on the ground at the national championship game as we speak. He did his show from Houston. He interviewed DeBoer and Jim Harbaugh together. And that leads me to believe that not only is ESPN not all that upset about this, I think it's the exact opposite. I think they're basically saying, you know what? We are riding with you. We believe in you. But more importantly, and this is the most important part, I think they understand Pat McAfee makes a lot of money for that organization, for that entity. And it's so interesting to me because, again, it goes back to the fundamental thing. If it is this Norby Williamson guy, he's just seeing the TV ratings and saying this guy isn't good enough. But Norby Williamson has been at ESPN since the 80s, okay? 1980s. You know how long ago that is? And he's missing out on everything that Pat McAfee provides. TV ratings, YouTube numbers, social media clips, interest. He's traveling every week for College Game Day. I will say this. I think he has added not really so much on game day, but the day before, being on campus, doing his show, getting fans out there. I think it's been a positive. I've seen everybody from Marcus Freeman on his show, Ryan Day, Marvin Harrison Jr. I can't remember everybody, but it's clear that he has value beyond just what are his TV numbers between, noon and 2 Eastern time or whenever he does his show. And so when I see McAfee, I don't know the guy. He did block me because I didn't like him on game day at first, but I respect the hell out of him and what he's built. But when I see him in Houston, I see him taking pictures with his boss's boss. I see him interviewing Kalen DeBoer and Jim Harbaugh, maybe the most important interview that will be done on ESPN outside of the NFL all year. Leads me to believe his bosses really like him. And I'd say this. Norby Williamson, like I said, he's been at ESPN since the 80s. My guess is he ain't going to be there very much longer. This is a prediction right now, early January. I think by the end of 2024, he's out. Now, this stuff in the corporate world, it takes a little bit longer. You got to do things quietly. I would say sometime between the end of Q2, so July 1, 2024 and December 31, 2024, this guy will be out and Pat McAfee will only be stronger. If you enjoyed this video, do me a quick favor. Make sure to subscribe to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. New episodes, new clips going up every single day, and new episodes of the Aaron Torres Pod every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Appreciate your support. Be back after the Natty.